Hello everyone and welcome to another Commander Tactics Deck Tech and our next installment in our $10 Deck Tech series. My name is Pope, and before we get started, I do want to remind everyone that we now have a Discord where everyone is welcome to join and we talk about all things Magic from deck brewing to upcoming sets. You can find the link for that down in the description below, so please do jump in because I love getting the chance to chat with people who enjoy watching this content. A few things to cover as we dive into this extremely limited budget brew. Number one, this deck does not include the price of basic lands in the budget. There's a good chance that you already have those, or that you can get them from a friend or LGS at little to no cost. Second, the price of shipping is not factored into this budget either because, well, that's not actually the price of the cards. And lastly, the way that we are able to keep this budget so tight is that we include cards that are heavily played and damaged. But now, let's take a look at who will be leading this deck, and that is the Bant Human Druid Chulane Teller of Tales. Chulane is a legendary 2/4 creature costing 2 generic, green, white, blue. He has Vigilance and says, whenever you cast a creature spell, you can draw a card and then put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Already, this makes Chulane extremely powerful, but it doesn't end there. We can also then pay 3 mana and tap Chulane to bounce a creature we control back to our hand. This is quite the powerful package on a creature. This tends to encourage a very low cost, repeatable ETB effects, and we are going to embrace that with open arms. We want to be able to play lots of lands and lots of cheap creatures for as long as we can and keep Chulane in play. And our second approach will be to play creatures that support a +1/+1 counter scheme. Simic is very good at distributing counters and enabling this strategy, so we're going to lean in heavy on that and make our creatures huge threats. And of course, you can get this entire deck for $10. Let's keep this show moving along though, taking a look at the creatures we're going to be playing and hopefully replaying over and over again, starting with Elvish Visionary, Coiling Oracle, and Archaeomancer. As we begin looking at these creatures, just imagine Chulane is in play, and every time we cast one of these, we get to draw and then play a land. It is just so powerful. But Elvish Visionary says whenever it ETBs, we get to draw a card. This means on cast, we draw a card, we play a land, and then we get to draw a second card for only 2 mana. Coiling Oracle, a green and a blue. This 1/1 says whenever it enters the battlefield, we reveal cards from the top of our library. If it's a land card, we get to put it onto the battlefield. But if it's not, we get to draw it anyway. Another very strong effect that if we can abuse it and repeat it over and over, we are just going to have a ton of lands. And then Archaeomancer, this 4 CMC wizard, says whenever it enters the battlefield, we can return an instant or sorcery card from our graveyard to our hand. Archaeomancer does come into play with this deck very heavily because there is a way we can loop 2 spells using Archaeomancer and another spell you'll see coming up in a bit. Next up, we have 3 removal creatures in Acidic Slime, Viridian Corruptor, and Meteor Golem. Acidic Slime 5 CMC has Death Touch, and whenever it ETBs, we can destroy a target artifact, enchantment, or land. A great utility to use against any of those pesky lands that might be supporting our opponents. Then we have Viridian Corruptor for only 3 CMC, has Infect on a 2/2 body, and says whenever ETBs we get to destroy a target artifact. Now, Viridian Corruptor with Infect might seem a little weird, but in this deck we are running multiple proliferate spells, and if we can pump the Corruptor up to be a big 5/5, 6/6, we can then swing in once or twice, get enough Infect on our opponent to just knock them out. A very strong card in this deck. And Meteor Golem 7 CMC, whenever it ETBs, we get to destroy any target non-land permanent an opponent controls. And then we have 3 more high value ETB creatures in Frilled Mystic, Village Bellringer, and White Mane Lion. Frilled Mystic, double green, double blue, has Flash, and acts as a counter spell. Whenever it enters the battlefield, we can counter any target spell. This means it's just a 4 CMC counter that we can abuse and repeat thanks to Chulane's Bounce ability. Village Bellringer, 2 and a white, has Flash. Again, whenever it enters the battlefield, we can untap all creatures we control. Having this with Flash speed means we can play this to untap all of our creatures and have a full wall of defenders if need be. And then White Mane Lion, this little cat doesn't seem too threatening. For only 1 and a white, it's a 2/2 with Flash. It says whenever ETBs, we can return a creature we control to our hand. Now, what makes Whitemane Lion so powerful is that for 2 mana, we can play Whitemane Lion, bounce it back to our own hand because it's able to target itself and then can just replay it over and over and over as long as we have the mana, drawing cards and playing lands every time. And then the last 2 ETB creatures I did want to talk about are 2 huge hitters in this deck, and that's Endray's Forerunner and Fiend Hunter. Endray's Forerunner is 8 CMC, has Vigilance, has Trample, and has Haste. Whenever it comes down, it gives all of our other creatures +2/+2, Vigilance, and Trample until the end of turn. If our board is wide enough, Endray's Forerunner is going to be a game ender. Obviously, Craterhoof Behemoth is the larger, more impactful counterpart, but Endray's is our budget-friendly version. And then we have Fiend Hunter, which just looks like an O-ring on a stick. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, we can exile another target creature. And whenever Fiend Hunter leaves the battlefield, we return the exiled creature to the battlefield under its owner's control. At face value, we can use Fiend Hunter to exile one of our creatures to get ETB value if we want. But the real threat with Fiend Hunter is that its ETB and exit effects are on separate lines, meaning they happen separately. So if we are able to cast Fiend Hunter, exile something with the effect on the stack, and then bounce it before the effect resolves with Chulane's ability, that creature that we exiled will remain in exile forever. This is a cheeky little combo that manipulates the stack and Fiend Hunter's ability and can help us to clear boards out if we need to use it that way. But now let's dive into the main focus of the deck, and that is our extremely powerful +1/+1 counter synergies. Kicking things off with 3 powerful gold creatures in Conclave Mentor, Enduring Scale Lord, and Juniper Order Ranger. Conclave Mentor is a brand new card printed in M21 and says if 1 or more counters would be placed on a creature that we control, that many +1 are put onto that creature instead. So just going to help us ramp up those counters. And whenever Conclave Mentor dies, we get to gain a little bit of life. Enduring Scale Lord is a big dragon costing 6 CMC, and whenever 1 or more +1 counters are put on another creature that we control, we get to put that many on to the Scale Lord as well. So he is just going to become a huge flying threat that will have to get dealt with quickly. And then Juniper Order Ranger, 5 CMC, 3 green-white, says whenever another creature ETBs under our control, we get to put a +1 counter on that creature and a +1 counter on Juniper Order Ranger. With 2 of these in play, our +1 counters are just going to go through the roof. Next up, we have a few instants and sorceries in Basri Solidarity, Pledge of Unity, and Biogenic Upgrade. Basri Solidarity, brand new printing from M21 as well, says we put a +1 counter on each creature we control. Very simple, costing only 2 CMC. Pledge of Unity, 1 green-white. This instant says put a +1 counter on each creature we control and gain life for each creature we control. Now, with Pledge of Unity, we can use this as a combat trick. After attackers have been declared, if our opponents decide to block or not block, we can use Pledge of Unity to either get in for more damage or turn the tables against our opponent's defending creatures. And then Biogenic Upgrade, 6 CMC, says distribute 3 +1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures. Then we get to double the number of +1 counters on each of those creatures. Just imagine the Scale Lord out with the Conclave Mentor. We're doubling, we're adding more. Biogenic Upgrade will just get out of hand. To keep the +1 counters flowing, we do have a few enchantments we'll also be running in Retreat to Kazandu, Durable Handicraft, and New Horizons. Retreat to Kazandu, 2 and a green, says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, choose 1. Put a +1 counter on a creature or gain 2 life. Now, thanks to Chulane, we are going to have lots of lands entering the battlefield, meaning we're going to have lots of counters coming on, and the loop will just keep going over and over, making our creatures huge. And Durable Handicraft, 1 a green, says whenever a creature you control enters the battlefield, you can pay 1 and put a +1 counter on that creature. Then if we want, we can pay 6 to sack this to put a counter on each of our creatures. Again, that ability can be activated at instant speed if we need to, so another strong battle trick in our back pocket. And then New Horizons, 2 a green, enchant a land. Whenever ETBs, we put a counter on a creature we control, and then now that land will tap for 2 of any 1 color. This is great ramp and able to help us keep our +1 counters coming in. Next up, we have a few spells that are going to help us proliferate in Pollen Bright Druid, Flux Channeler, and Contentious Plan. Pollen Bright Druid, a creature that says whenever it ETBs, we can either put a +1 counter on a creature or proliferate. With all the counters we're going to be having out across our board, being able to proliferate multiple times, bounce Pollen Bright, do it again, very powerful. Flux Channeler 2 and a blue says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we get to proliferate. While this deck is mostly creatures, we still do have over 25 other spells that are non-creatures that will trigger our Flux Channeler. And Contentious Plan, this sorcery 1 and a blue says proliferate, so we're going to get all those counters back. And again, if we do have infect on somebody, we can proliferate those infect counters, and we get to draw a card whenever we cast Contentious Plan. And then we have a few card draw abilities that are going to benefit off of all the +1 counters we have out in Zamek Guildmage and Bred for the Hunt. Zamek Guildmage says, for green and a blue, this turn, each creature we control enters the battlefield with an additional +1 counter. Then if we also want, we can pay a green and a blue and remove a +1 counter from a creature to draw a card. Now neither of these require the Guildmage to tap, so we can activate them as many times as we want. And Bred for the Hunt, this enchantment 1 green blue says whenever a creature you control with a +1 counter on it deals combat damage, we can draw a card. Both these spells are going to help us find the answers we need when we need them. And lastly, rounding out this deck, a few big hitters in the +1 counters category in Bioshift, Invigorating Surge, and Plane-Wide Celebration. Bioshift for a green and a blue says move any number of +1 counters from a creature you control to another creature with the same controller. This means during combat we can activate this to move all of our counters to an unblockable creature and get in for a huge amount of damage, hopefully killing that opponent outright. Invigorating Surge 2 and a green, this instant again can be activated during combat, says we put a +1 counter on a creature we control and then we get to double the number of counters on that creature. Now again, if we have a creature that is big with a lot of counters on them unblocked, we can then double that to get in for just a insane amount of damage. Put the two together and we're moving counters and doubling them, I mean it's going to get out of control. And then lastly, Plane-Wide Celebration, one of our most expensive cards financially and CMC wise in this deck, says choose 4. You can choose the same mode more than once. We can create a 2/2 creature token, we can return a permanent card from our graveyard to our hand, we can proliferate, or we can gain 4 life. The goal with Plane-Wide Celebration is to cast it, proliferate, maybe gain life if we need it, maybe get a 2/2, but we also want to return a permanent card from our graveyard to our hand every time. This is going to help us ensure we have lots of permanents. Then, with Plane-Wide Celebration in our graveyard, we can cast Archaeomancer to return Plane-Wide Celebration to our hand. We can then bounce Archaeomancer with Chulane, cast Plane-Wide Celebration yet again, get more permanents back, proliferate more, gain life, whatever we need, and repeat the process over and over, keeping casting Plane-Wide Celebration as long as we have the mana. While this is a bit of an expensive loop to pull off, it is essentially foolproof. We are going to keep getting more and more counters, more and more tokens, and more life. Our number one concern is that our Archaeomancer does get removed before we can bounce it to our hand, but even if that happens, we can then return our Archaeomancer with other spells, letting us bring permanents back from the graveyard. But now that we've seen most of the ins and outs of this deck and how we are going to be operating it, let's take a look at what else we have inside the 99. Removal and control in this deck, very on par. We've got tons of ways to deal with whatever threats need to be dealt with, and many of them are going to be repeatable thanks to Chulane's bounce effect. Our card draw in advantage coming in at a solid 10 cards, but mainly we're going to be drawing so many cards off of our commander alone that even if this did suffer a little bit, we would still be completely fine. And then ramp, we have a ton of ramp in this deck. Number one, we want to make sure we have lots of lands to play with Chulane. Chulane's going to ramp us a lot, and then all of our other spells going to be able to get those lands into play. And the power of this deck, I put at a solid 5. It could have blowout games and it could be a dud, but you can guarantee one thing when you play this deck. You are going to be playing lots of creatures, you are going to be drawing lots of cards, and you are going to be putting down a lot of lands. All of those equate to a very strong centerpiece for a good deck. Winning with this deck can be boiled down to a few simple ways. Number one, we're going to try to go wide and get cards like Endray's Forerunner into play to boost up our whole team and alpha strike all of our opponents at the same time. But if we can't pull that off, well, we're going to be playing the long game, trying to build up our army and buff them with all the +1 counters we have. And if we can't get it done still, we're going to be looking to repeat and replay Planewide Celebration and our other very strong permanents over and over again, thanks to our ability to recur our permanents and replay all of our spells. Chulane is a brand new commander on the scene, just getting printed in Throne of Eldraine, so he's been around less than 1 year and he is already making waves. His abilities are so powerful and it makes a very promising commander for such a cheap deck, being able to have that ability whenever we need to. This deck is a lot of fun, it has a lot of unique interactions, and being able to repeat those interactions over and over again makes for quite a bit of fun. And of course, there's a lot of creatures in this deck that you could absolutely switch out for whatever ETB value you like. Go ahead, give it a try. But that does bring us to the end of this $10 deck tech. Chulane is definitely able to make a big impact the moment he hits the board, allowing us to draw tons of cards and put tons of lands into play. But hey, let me know down in the comment section below, what did you think? Are you going to give this deck a shot? I mean, it's only a $10 bill, so you can definitely bring it, play it with some casual friends, or hey, maybe if you're looking to introduce somebody to the game of Commander, this is definitely a great way to do it. Hey, if you're new here and you did enjoy this deck tech, maybe consider subscribing or at least hitting that like button to let me know you did enjoy it. And if you're a returning subscriber, thanks so much. I appreciate you guys coming back to enjoy this content. If you're a Twitter user, you can head on over there, drop us a follow at EDH Tactics. And if you want to go the extra mile, we do have a Patreon now. Not super active on it, but again, that's just if you want to support the channel to keep us doing what we're doing. You can find us on Patreon, and that's just at Commander Tactics. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll be seeing you for the next one.